Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Today we've got a new civilization of underground people discovered in the Amazon jungle, a cave connected to the Knights Templar, plus the mystery of the Tree of Life. Today is all about ancient things that scientists still can't explain, but we're going to try because this is Origins Explained. The Giant Stairs of Ollantaytambo. How did the Inca build the giant steps of Ollantaytambo? The humongous staircase at this ancient site makes no logical sense. Let me tell you why. The stairs are big, way too big to be climbed by people unless the people happen to be 15 feet tall. The huge stairway etched into the side of the mountain looks like steps leading to the fortress of a giant. Goliath couldn't have comfortably climbed these stairs, and he was 9 feet tall. The site of Ollantaytambo is located in the Sacred Valley of Peru, a place with a rich history going back to the dawn of Andean civilization. The valley cuts between rolling hills and steep mountains, where prior to the arrival of the Spanish, the Inca worshipped the sun god Inti. It's about 37 miles from Cusco, a holy sanctuary on par with Machu Picchu. The Inca used to call it the place of the rising sun. What I'm trying to say is that Ollantaytambo was important. The ruins reflect just how important it was even 500 years after the Spanish invasion. There are sprawling terraces, monumental temples, huge stone structures that defy explanation. The fact that everything is built on the side of a mountain is what makes Ollantaytambo that much more amazing. Then there's the massive stone staircase, the most notable feature of the entire valley. It's over 150 steps up the side of the mountain straight to the entrance of the Temple of the Sun. It's been called one of the most impressive feats of Inca engineering. All these years later, the stairs are still in perfect condition. The stairs in my house aren't even in perfect condition. How did the Inca make them so strong? When the Spanish arrived in the Andes in the 16th century, they were blown away by the impressive architectural skills of the Inca. The Spanish wanted to know how the Inca, who they saw as primitive, had built such a wondrous thing. They didn't give them any credit at all, but this was supposedly how they did it. The Inca carved huge blocks using primitive tools like stone chisels and then dragged them up the side of the mountain using pulleys and ropes. Then they fit the stones together using a technique known as ashlar. The blocks fit so perfectly that no mortar was needed, and they clicked into place like puzzle pieces. It makes sense, but it's hard to believe. This sanctuary was built on the top of a mountain. These giant steps were not meant to be used as actual steps, clearly, unless you were a ginormous demigod. The theory is that these steps are enormous terraces to grow crops. That would make the most sense. Here, hidden in the mountains, the people would easily be able to protect their food source and stay isolated from the rest of the world. What do you think? Zombies of the Himalayas. Would you call me crazy if I told you that there are zombies in a remote area of the Himalayan mountains? Well, that's exactly what I'm telling you right now. In Tibetan folklore, they speak of mysterious ancient beings known as rolangs. Ro is a word that roughly translates to corpse, while langs is a word that means to rise up. So rolangs means risen corpse. The Tibetan people believe that in order to create one of these zombies, you must be a sorcerer. Only through foul magic can someone make the dead rise. It requires a ritual that is not for the faint of heart. The sorcerer must be alone at night with the corpse. By chanting the right magic spell, placing their head upon the corpse, the sorcerer can breathe life into the creature. As you can imagine, at first, the corpse will begin to twitch. Once the twitching starts, the sorcerer needs to reach into the corpse's mouth, pull out its tongue, and bite it off. You didn't think necromancy was going to be easy or not disgusting, did you? For as long as anyone can remember, this unusual practice has been done in Tibet as a way to gain dark power. And while it can supposedly give the sorcerer access to mysterious abilities, it can also destroy them. In 1929, Alexandra David Neal wrote a fascinating book on the history of magic and mysticism in Tibet. In her book, she described the cost of performing such a ritual. If one failed to bring the rolang into the world as a zombie, they would die. Risky business for sure. Rolangs are not your ordinary Dawn of the Living Dead zombies. For one, they can't bend over. Rolangs are really stiff, so they walk more like Frankenstein's monster with a lumbering, rigid gait. They can't bend any of their joints. The people of the Himalayas, especially in the high, snowy plateaus of Tibet, fear the walking dead so much that their houses often have low doorways. They enter their houses like crawling in through a doggy door. This uncomfortable design is on purpose so that the Rolangs can't enter their homes. The zombies can't bend their joints, so they can't stoop low enough to get through the dog-sized door frames. What do you think about the freakish beasts that come to life in the Himalayas? Is it superstition, or do the dead truly walk? A mystery cave culture in Ecuador. Evidence of a lost, technologically advanced culture has been found in a dark, mossy cave in Ecuador. I can't tell if this discovery is something from a horror movie or the new Indiana Jones. The cave might not actually be a cave. It could be a ruin that's been completely swallowed by the jungle. You wouldn't even see it if you walked by unless you poked your head in the cave and looked around. And even then, it might be too dark and spooky to stick around to investigate. Inside the cave are incredible carvings etched into the perfectly smooth stone walls. The walls aren't bumpy and uneven like you get in most caves. These ones are smooth like the walls of a temple. There aren't many details I can tell you about this discovery right now because it's a little vague. Images appeared of the mystery cave and its petroglyphs on the blog of archaeology student Tom Finn. Thanks, Tom! Here's one of the pictures showing the cave. You can see the strange images carved into the wall. There are faces, human-like creatures, geometric symbols, ritual motifs, a lot of strange stuff, and then nearly 12 pictures uploaded to the blog. All of it is in this little niche of a cavern with a flat ceiling and smooth walls. The only information I have about the location is that it's in Ecuador, somewhere in the jungle. Whoever found this place allegedly discovered some stone artifacts as well, though no pictures of them were released. The cave is filled with debris and shattered bits of rock. The walls of the cave, which might be the walls of a man-made structure, seem to go lower than the floor. They seem to move beneath the topsoil as if the structure continues below ground. Part of this thing could be buried. It might not be a natural cave at all, but a huge megalith hiding underneath who knows how many feet of dirt. What if it's the top of a multi-leveled temple, or a pyramid, or some other complex? And what's the age of this place? So many questions! There are reportedly 2 other caves nearby with more petroglyphs and artifacts in them, suggesting a civilization was here at some point in the past. But there is no other evidence of who these people were or how they built whatever this place is. I know I usually have more information, but this is just such a weird discovery with such incredible implications I had to share it with you. So what do you think was going on in the Ecuadorian jungle? And now for number 7, but first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Dorothy Breen and Sonofior L for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Lost language and lost gods. Last year, in the remote Anatolia region of Turkey, archaeologists were excavating a ruin when they found a previously unknown language. In the last few months, archaeologists have been trying to make sense of it. They have named the language Kalasma, in the belief that it was spoken inside the mysterious Hittite kingdom of the Old World. The Hittite kingdom was one of the most powerful of all the ancient empires. Their history goes back almost 4,000 years, developing from a primitive indigenous culture in Turkey around 1700 BC. Nobody knows exactly how they came to power, but if the Bible is to be believed, it had something to do with Noah and his ark. According to the Old Testament, the Hittites were the primary adversaries of the Israelites and God himself. In the book of Genesis, the Hittites are described as the descendants of Heth, who was the son of Canaan, who was the son of Ham, who was the son of Noah. Are you with me? What you might find fascinating is that although the Bible calls them the Hittites, and so do modern archaeologists, that wasn't what they called themselves. In their very own documents that have been found in the ruins of their civilization, they named themselves the Nesili, kind of like how English people call Japan, Japan, but the Japanese call it Nippon. Isn't that curious? Archaeologists were excavating one of the Hittite cities when they came across a tablet. The tablet was written in a language nobody had ever seen before. So was the next tablet found, and the next one. Archaeologists found 174 of them. The new language of Kalasma was found to be similar to Luwian, which was used by the Luwians south of the Hittites in Anatolia. Because of its similarities, it was a piece of cake to decipher. Professor Dr. Daniel Schwemmer at the University of Würzburg in Germany converted the cuneiform writing into Latin. Then linguistic experts from other German institutions analyzed and deciphered the text. Anticlimactically, the professor said the content of the tablets isn't very important. They discuss some type of ritual but don't go into explicit details. Even so, the tablets did reveal some important information about the Hittites. First and foremost, they were multicultural and multilingual. The Hittite kingdom consisted of many different people who spoke many different languages. They were also religiously open. When the Hittites conquered a region, rather than wipe out the old gods, they would incorporate them into their own system and worship them as their own. The Hittites tried to incorporate new religions into their own religion as a way of gaining more power. More gods, more power. The Kalasma texts are a reflection of that. Historians believe the Hittites kept all the languages alive that they could because, by their logic, gods only spoke their native language. If one language was destroyed, the god who spoke that language would abandon them. You can see why the Israelites despised the Hittites so much. The Israelites had one god and one god only, but the Hittites wanted all the gods. Royston Cave. In England, there is a cave chamber carved into the bedrock that has ties to the Freemasons, the Knights Templar, and the Holy Grail. Nobody, and I mean nobody, has ever figured out the truth behind this underground cave. To be entirely honest, it's likely that nobody ever will. It's called Royston Cave, located in Hertfordshire. Inside the dark and clammy underground dungeon are inexplicable carvings, which allegedly hold the secrets of the Holy Grail. Some think the carvings were made by the Knights Templar, who did happen to establish the nearby settlement of Baldock. Others think the symbols were left by Freemasons, and could, if deciphered, reveal secrets of their organization. There are also some more disturbing theories, like that the cave was used as a prison, a cavern cell for trapping witches or criminals. The possibilities, while grim, are endless. The contents of the cavern are unknown, but the origin of its discovery is well documented. In 1742, a group of workers were putting together a bench in a market when they found a buried millstone. When they lifted the stone, they found it had been hiding a vertical shaft, kind of like a gigantic sewer cover. The hole was about 2 feet in diameter, leading into a pit 16 feet deep. The vertical shaft had shallow holes cut into the rock to use as a ladder. In typical 18th century fashion, the first person inside the hole was a small boy. The boy was sent in to make sure it was safe. Then the adults followed. They found that the cave was almost entirely full of dirt. Someone had tried to get rid of this place, and they had nearly succeeded. The underground chamber had been filled with soil, and the dome above it had been partially bricked over. Someone had tried to seal the chamber, then had sealed the tunnel leading to it with the millstone. It didn't take long before locals had gotten every last ounce of dirt from the cavern. They thought it was filled with treasure, so the work happened quickly, and nobody even got paid for it. It's amazing how fast things can get done with a handful of volunteers who think there's gold at the end of the rainbow. There was no treasure, nor was there anything of much interest. Reverend G. North visited Royston Cave shortly after it was found. He noted it had some fragments of bone in it and a small piece of brass, but that was it. The cave was largely ignored afterward, despite the fact its walls are covered in strange images. There are carvings of saints, including Saint Christopher holding the child Jesus on his shoulder and carrying a staff in one hand. There's an image of Saint Michael with a sword drawn. You can see the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ, with Christ awaiting the resurrection, and a hand motif that might represent the Holy Spirit. Based on everything I've just told you, scholars think the cave was used as a secret meeting place by the Knights Templar starting around 1307. The religious iconography is unmistakably Templar. Plus, it's well known that they were active in the area. The cavern may have been used for Templar initiation rites, or even for ceremonies that nobody today knows anything about. There are rumors that the Templars worshipped evil gods that they encountered during the Crusades, so maybe they were worshipping them underground. Maybe the Templars were heretics, just like the church claimed, before they destroyed the Templars. But that's a story for another day. As for the legend of the Holy Grail, that's a little more cryptic. People have suggested that the strange mishmash collage of religious symbology on the walls could point to secret knowledge of the Grail. The Templars may have left an indecipherable map on the cave walls of where they hid the magic cup. That could be why they went through such lengths to seal the chamber. The secrets of the Harappa graves. In 2016, two very unusual skeletons were discovered in an Indus Valley city known as Rakhigarhi. The skeletons were found in a grave on the outskirts of a city that belonged to one of the oldest urbanized civilizations on the planet. The skeletons proved to be disturbing, strange, and eerily romantic. I can't tell you about the skeletons until we have a little talk about the Indus Valley. Trust me, it's information you want to have. In the 1920s, archaeologists in Pakistan found ruins of a city bigger than seemed humanly possible. They called the buried metropolis Mohenjo-Daro. What they didn't realize at the time was that they had just opened up the door on a civilization even more mysterious than the Egyptians. The Indus Valley civilization was around at the same time as ancient Egypt, only modern scholars know way less about them. Egypt is so incredibly well documented that historians can list the names of just about every pharaoh from the first dynasty to Cleopatra. Scientists don't know the name of a single ruler of the Indus Valley, not one name. By the time the civilization was identified, scientists had already been able to read Egyptian hieroglyphics for almost 100 years. That's how new the lost civilization is to scientists. Their culture collapsed around 1500 BC for undetermined reasons. Although they did leave a written record of themselves behind, their language was so complex that the best linguists in the world have never cracked it. Maybe AI can help out. Now that you know who we're dealing with, let's get back to these two skeletons. They were found facing one another as if they died in an intimate embrace. Archaeologist Facedo Disc, who led the research team, said the couple likely died at the exact same time, but their causes of death are still unknown. The couple was buried in a sand pit. The man was about 35, the woman around 25. Both were unusually tall for members of the Indus Valley civilization. He stood at 5'8" and she was 5'6". Both of them seemed quite healthy. When scientists tested their skeletons, they didn't find any lesions or hints of disease. This isn't the first time that skeletons have been found in an Indus Valley city. It's fairly common to discover Indus Valley graves with little or nothing in them. This civilization was completely unique when it came to their burials. In neighboring Mesopotamia, wealthy people were buried with jewels, artifacts, and all kinds of precious items. In India and Pakistan, Indus Valley people were almost universally buried with nothing except for maybe a few earthen pots with some food in them, and maybe some pieces of Spartan jewelry. To this day, archaeologists have never found anything resembling a royal burial. It's been so long that experts think there may not have been kings or queens in the Indus Valley. Scholars can't figure out how their society even functioned, or if they even had a government. There isn't anything that's been found in an Indus Valley city that isn't in the realm of extremely mysterious. What do you think happened to this couple? Were they lovers, siblings, family, besties? How did they die at the exact same time without any evidence of injury or sickness? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Treasure and intrigue in Timbuktu. Scholars are in a race against time to save the ancient manuscripts from one of the most legendary African cities on the continent. Manuscripts continue to emerge from the ruins of Timbuktu, a place everyone has inadvertently heard of but few know much about. Don't worry, that's what I'm here for. Everyone has heard the saying, from here to Timbuktu. But where is Timbuktu anyway? It's actually a city in Mali. Timbuktu was a powerful African trading hub and one of the most popular centers for learning in the world. The city was controlled by the Songhai Empire when it reached its height in the 16th century. It was so famous that students traveled from across the world to study in its schools. Timbuktu had an estimated 25,000 students, nearly a quarter of the city's whole population, according to researcher John Hunwick. People often ask why African civilizations weren't as advanced as the ones in Europe, but they were. Timbuktu is living proof of it. The Islamic city was home to 3 gargantuan mosques comparable to any major churches in Europe. Their holy book was the Quran instead of the Bible, but they weren't any less developed for it. Timbuktu is home to scientists who studied mathematics, geography, astronomy, and law. It was recently revealed that scientists found a recipe for toothpaste in the ruins of Timbuktu that was written 500 years ago. Unfortunately, though, Timbuktu is in great danger. Located in the West African nation of Mali, at the southern edge of the Sahara, the city is under attack. In 2012, extremist groups purposely attacked the city's heritage. They went into the ancient tombs and smashed them with pickaxes. The worst of it was the manuscripts. The extremists went after the ancient knowledge that has been preserved in the city for centuries. Some experts have said that the ancient libraries in Timbuktu hold documents just as significant as the Dead Sea Scrolls. The mystical wisdom hiding in the busted libraries and forgotten cellars of the city cannot be overlooked. There is still much that scientists need to learn about Timbuktu. Most documents place its founding in around 1100 AD. But before the extremist attacks, archaeological work began to reveal even earlier origins buried beneath. There is something far older and far more powerful hidden under Timbuktu. Douglas Park, an archaeologist at Yale University, said evidence points to a large settlement already on the site of Timbuktu in 200 AD. The initial occupation could date to the Stone Age. The city could have connections to the Berber tribes who lived in the eastern Sahara and practiced strange forms of magic and mysticism. Sadly, the hostility and modern dangers are preventing scientists from getting to the bottom of the mystery. They are racing against the clock just to preserve the ancient libraries before they're destroyed. Finding the World Tree. It's time to hunt down the World Tree, the legendary tree of life found in most major religions over the past couple thousand years. There is a place so far off the beaten path in Sweden that you might not even be able to find it. It's a lumpy field of grass with a couple of boulders in it and the pitiful remains of an old well. There is a sign at the site explaining that the well was excavated in the 20th century but made during the 1180s. An old church was built at the site along with the well. To be entirely frank with you, it's all very boring, until you get to the legendary part. Legend has it the well was built amidst the roots of the mythical world tree from Norse folklore, also known as Yggdrasil. There's no physical proof, of course, that's why it's a legend. The only piece of vegetation at the site now is a bush that hardly looks like it holds all the realms on its branches. Let's step outside the realm of reality and into the world of magic. In the 19th century poems of the Norsemen, Yggdrasil is an immense tree that holds together the 9 realms. It's at the very center of the cosmos, a meeting place of the gods, its branches extending into the heavens. Creatures live within it, including the powerful dragon Njörgr. The legend is reflected in other mythologies, even Christianity. What a lot of people don't realize about the Garden of Eden is that it was no ordinary fruit tree that Eve ate from. It was the Tree of Life. This is a tree that appears everywhere you look. It's in the Torah, the Quran, and Germanic neo-paganism. In Chinese mythology, the Tree of Life produces a peach of immortality once every 3 years. In Hinduism, the divine tree is in the sacred garden of Amaravati, a mythical city that may or may not have existed. The Hindu Tree of Life can grant wishes, but only if it's in a good mood. The Assyrians had their own Tree of Life, it too involved in stories of immortality. The tree is depicted in countless works of art found in the fortresses and temples of Mesopotamia. It played a major part in Assyrian everyday life and in their religion. Even in North America, on the other side of the ocean from the rest of civilization, the natives had a Tree of Life. In Iroquois myth, the Tree of Life is located in the heavens where the first humans lived. It's often called Grandmother Cedar. Do you believe in the World Tree? The Singapore Stone. Experts have been trying to decipher the Singapore Stone for years and have always come up empty-handed. The inscription is so old that it's almost completely faded. It could be that no one ever learns what the inscription says. The stone used to be part of a much larger rock perched at the entrance of the Singapore River. In 1843, the British blew it up to build a fortress. Only 3 fragments of it were saved. One of them survives at the National Museum of Singapore, and nobody knows what happened to the other 2. The stone is a mystery because nobody knows what it says or who put it at the mouth of the river. The writing system is completely unique, never seen in any other culture. Some say it was carved in the 10th century by the Majapahit civilization. Others believe the stone is even older. It could be the last surviving remnant of a civilization that dominated Singaporean prehistory. The best guess archaeologists have is that the writing is Old Javanese or some kind of Sanskrit. But what if it's even older? What if the ancient marker has ties to Atlantis or to some other forgotten antediluvian nation? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. The Lost Dunhuang Manuscripts. 1,000 years ago, at the edge of the Gobi Desert in western China, not far from the border of Mongolia, somebody sealed a cave. This wasn't like the Knights Templar sealing the chamber of Royston Cave in England. It was even more epic. The chamber was filled with more than 500 cubic feet of manuscripts. These manuscripts remained hidden in complete darkness just outside the oasis town of Dunhuang until the year 1900. It was one of the biggest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. People barely remembered that it happened today, but at the same time, it was as big of a discovery as the Dead Sea Scrolls. To make matters even more exciting, it was found totally by accident. In the Middle Ages, Dunhuang was a flourishing city and a major place of worship for Buddhists. Pilgrims traveled across China just to visit the cave shrines on the outskirts of the city. Sadly, their prestige didn't last forever. In fact, it didn't last very long at all. By the early part of the 20th century, the previously prospering city had become a lonely backwater. The caves were abandoned and forgotten. Then, a Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu began trying to take care of the neglected caves. In 1900, he stumbled upon the sealed cave library by accident when he noticed the smoke from his cigarette was being sucked through the back wall of a shrine. Wang knocked down the wall, realizing it was sealing something. Inside was a small cavern with a mountain of documents. The mountain was almost 10 feet high. The ancient scripts were written in a language that the Taoist monk couldn't read. When explorer R.L. Stein learned of the discovery, he happened to be nearby in Central Asia on an archaeological expedition. He traveled to Dunhuang and offered to buy the whole library from the monk. At the end of a long negotiation, Stein convinced Wang to sell him 10,000 manuscripts and scrolls for £130, about $167. I'm not an expert on the price of ancient scrolls, but I think it's safe to say that Stein got a good deal. By 1910, only a tiny fragment of the original manuscripts remained. Only then did the Chinese government step in and transfer the surviving texts to Beijing. Today, the library is scattered around the world, long since sold into private collections. Since 1994, a team at the British Library has been working to gather the contents of the scattered library. It's a difficult task, but worth it when you know what was contained inside the texts. The scripts are all about Buddhist life 1,000 years ago. They tell stories about Buddhists exchanging ideas with Christians, Manichaeans, Jews, and even Zoroastrians. Ancient prayers were translated from Sanskrit by Indian monks who were working with the Khans of Old Turkey. The most important manuscript that was found in the library was the Diamond Sutra, written between roughly the 2nd and 5th centuries AD. It's the closest thing that Buddhism has to a gospel. The Diamond Sutra is a conversation between the Buddha and his pupil Subhati, and is said to have been dictated directly by the Buddha himself. The Gospels weren't written by Jesus, though they contain his teachings. The Diamond Sutra was dictated by the Buddha's own mouth, making it insanely valuable and important.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The legend of the Ant People. In the southwestern part of the United States, also known as the Four Corners region, there are still some descendants of the Native American Hopi people living in the area. The Hopi were split into several tribes, including one formerly called the Anasazi. Now known as the ancestral Puebloans, these people lived in the desert and built huge dwellings on cliffs and rocks between 550 and 1300 AD. Then they vanished. The Hopi people's traditions were rooted deeply in nature, with a respect for all living things. They lived according to natural law and believed in something a little different from most other religions of the ancient world. The Hopi didn't look to the sky and tell stories about gods in the heavens. Instead, they believed gods came from the ground and sprouted upwards like potatoes. They also believed that there were giant ants living inside the earth, like strange insect overlords that ruled everything from their subterranean lairs. That's not to say they didn't still have great respect for the stars in the sky. The major archaeological sites in the Four Corners match up almost perfectly with the constellation of Orion. It looks as if the Anasazi made their settlements based on the shape of Orion, with one settlement for each connecting star. And then there's the whole thing about the ants. Some experts believe it wasn't ants the Hopi Native Americans were talking about at all, but actual extraterrestrial beings who lived in the ground. This is reflected in many of the petroglyphs found throughout the southwestern United States, showing curious beings seeming to hold all the universe in their hands. Mysterious Viking Cave Network. In the summer of 2021, a series of very mysterious man-made caves were discovered southwest of Oddi, that's in Iceland, with the artificial caves dating back to the 10th century, to the era of the Vikings. In the recent past, researchers have worked very hard to excavate the mysterious tunnels and figure out just what in the world they were used for. What they've accomplished so far is to reveal a massive system of interconnected subterranean passages. This place is like a primitive underground labyrinth, like an ant's nest hidden underneath Iceland, and yet researchers still haven't been able to figure out the true purpose for the construction of such an immense and complex network of caverns. Archaeologist Kristborg Porsdotter said she had no words to describe the discovery. That's how mysterious it's been even for the scientists involved. Kristborg said that never before have such large structures been studied from the 10th century in Iceland. This could be the biggest building project the Vikings ever made, and yet experts can't figure out anything about it. What we do know is that Oddi was originally the seat of the Odvarjar clan, one of the most powerful groups in Viking history. Other things have been found nearby, like an old church, a farm, and a vicarage. Oddly enough, Oddi was one of the first places 1,000 years ago to build a church when Christianity found its way to Iceland. Still, that doesn't really help with the mysterious tunnels. Hopefully, researchers will make some headway soon, or at least figure out how deep the mysterious caverns go. The Shanidar III cold case. The fossilized skeleton of a Neanderthal man was discovered inside the Shanidar cave in Iraq back in 1957. But between 1953 and 1960, 10 individuals were excavated from the same cave. It proved to be the largest single sample of Neanderthal fossils uncovered anywhere on the planet. But the one that was found in 1957 proved to be the most fascinating. Neanderthals date back to around 45,000 years ago. These were the very definition of cave people. They lived deep in the shady nooks and crannies of Iraq's caverns, where they slowly learned how to use stone tools and make fire. But that's not all they were learning in their cave homes. They were also figuring out how to commit murder. The skeleton is currently on display at the Hall of Human Origins, and from what the archaeologists can determine, this man is the oldest unsolved cold case in the world. An inspection of his bones revealed he was about 40 or 50 years old, stood about 5'6", and died from a stab wound to his chest. The depth of the wound shows that whatever he was stabbed with pierced his chest and collapsed his lung. We don't know for sure if that was what killed him, but it appears to be the very first known homicide, or at least attempted homicide. The Mini Coffins. In the 1830s, a group of schoolboys were hunting for rabbits in the Scottish countryside near Edinburgh. According to the legend, these boys found a small opening in a rock on the northeast side of Arthur Seat, which is a local hill. Hidden in that small opening were 3 slabs of stone, and when the boys pushed those slabs of stone aside, they discovered 17 miniature coffins. The coffins were arranged in 3 rows, with each one just under 4 inches long. The coffins were made from pine wood and contained within them small humanoid figures. They looked like tiny sarcophagi with mummies inside of them. These bizarre relics became known as the Lilliputian coffins. To this day, experts don't have an answer for what they were doing behind those stone slabs. Each miniature doll buried inside its own little coffin has a unique set of clothing. These tiny pieces of fabric were stitched together and then glued around the figures, turning them into tiny people. It's all quite creepy, and nobody knows who put them there or why they were made. It's been almost 200 years, and all we have are theories. Some say the dolls were used in satanic spells or witchcraft. Some archaeologists think they could have been part of an ancient burial custom. But according to George Dalgleish, the keeper of Scottish history at the National Museum of Scotland, the coffins were probably connected to Burke and Hare. They were a pair of serial killers who murdered 17 people in Edinburgh, and many historians agree that they could have left exactly 17 tiny figures buried in coffins, representing their crimes. Treasure in the Seychelles. There is possibly a pirate treasure worth over $100 million hiding on an island in the Indian Ocean. Many islands in the Indian Ocean are said to be littered with treasure from one pirate or another. But this one is supposed to be the holy grail of pirate treasure, the biggest pile of loot never discovered. And the story of it has been passed down through the generations. It's said to be somewhere in the Seychelles, which means there are 115 potential islands where the treasure could be buried. The tale begins in 1716, with a pirate by the name of Labus, or the Buzzard. In 1721, Labus killed every man on board a Portuguese galleon in the port of Bourbon Island, today called La Reunion. This Portuguese galleon was filled to the brim with unbelievable treasures: gold, silver, raw diamonds, goblets made of pure gold, and gemstones. It was massive. Realizing they had struck actual gold, the pirates fled to their headquarters on the island nation of Madagascar. They divided the booty, Labus vanished, and he supposedly buried what he had taken somewhere in the Seychelles, probably on the island of Mahé. Still, this mystery is unsolved because nobody has ever found the treasure. A local resident named Reginald Herbert Cruz Wilkins searched for it for 27 years until he died in 1977. His son John, to this very day, is still looking for the lost treasure. Blackbeard's Silver Skull. In Hampton Roads, Virginia, there is a spot called Blackbeard's Point. It's said that after Blackbeard was killed in his last battle in the year 1718, his head was severed, put on a pole, and then erected at Blackbeard's Point overlooking the Chesapeake Bay. It was a deterrent for any who would turn to a life of piracy. The head of the famous pirate sat on that pole for several years until it vanished. After it was gone for some time, it showed up at a pub in Virginia. Somebody had lined the skull with silver so that it could be used as a drinking goblet. It traded hands multiple times for the next 200 years. Finally, in the 1950s, maritime historian Edward Rowe claimed to have come into possession of the skull. After he died in 1982, his widow finally handed the skull over to the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. The mystery here is that we don't actually know whose skull was sitting in the museum. It was definitely a human skull, but there was never any physical evidence that it actually belonged to the pirate captain. Even though the Peabody Essex Museum did lend the skull out at least one time for an art exhibit, the museum no longer has the silver-plated skull on display. The Sund Dagger. High atop the Facedo Butte in Chaco Canyon is something strange. There is a set of spiral petroglyphs carved into the cliff just behind 3 large slabs of rock. According to the experts, these are solar markers. On the summer solstice, a vertical shaft of light pierces through the main spiral precisely at its center. And on the winter solstice, 2 shafts of light do the exact same thing. And on the spring and fall equinoxes, slivers of light cover the center of the smaller spiral to show a change in seasons. Basically, at the top of the Facedo Butte is one of the oldest observatories in the world. It's now known as the Sund Dagger. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly who made this observatory, nor how they even figured out the complexity of it. The best guess archaeologists have is that it was the Anasazi, the mysterious Native Americans who built their desert homes nearby. But there is no way to know for sure, and unfortunately in 1989 the place was irreversibly damaged. Because of so many visitors climbing all over it, the sediment shifted and the light no longer hits the spiral on the summer solstice. This has rendered the observatory useless after roughly 1,000 years of working perfectly fine. The Facedo Disc. On the Greek island of Crete, hidden in plain sight for 4,000 years, is an unsolvable mystery. It's called the Facedo Disc, and it was found in the great Minoan palace of Phaistos. The disc was originally identified by an Italian archaeologist in the early 20th century. There are many different settlements and palaces scattered across the old Greek island, which was once home to the great Minoan civilization. And in all of them, researchers have found some kind of writing, be it tablets of Linear A at the Palace of Knossos or Linear B at the Hagia Triade site. But at Phaistos, there is no trace of any writing, and it made little sense considering how huge and regal this palace once was. There should have been some kind of writing somewhere, and in 1908, archaeologists found it by way of the Facedo Disc. The artifact is a circle of clay about 16 inches in diameter. That's about the size of a frisbee. It was made in the 2nd millennium BC in the Bronze Age and is stamped with 241 unique tokens, which in total comprise 45 distinct signs. These were made by pressing seals into the disc when it was still soft. The mystery is that nobody has ever decoded these 241 tokens. We know the tablet says something, but nobody knows what. It's so confusing that most archaeologists have simply chalked it up to a hoax, even though it's confirmed at over 2,000 years old. Maybe archaeologists are so stumped they'd just rather pretend the disc didn't exist at all. You should probably take a crack at it and see if you can decipher the code. Giant footprints. Some photographs have been circulating of a man's bare foot resting inside of a giant footprint stamped into the rock. This footprint is surprising because it's clearly about 5 times larger than the average man's foot. The only thing that may have left a footprint like that would have been a dinosaur. And yet, judging by the shape of the print and its distinctly human toes, it appears to have been made by an enormous person. Of course, we don't know if this is true. The original story appeared in 2016. It said the footprint was first discovered in fossilized rock in the Pingyan village of China's Guizhou province. But there have been no professional archaeologists who have confirmed this. All we have are a few pictures, a flaky story, and some amateur archaeologists who claim the humanoid footprint is 200 million years old. So, while fascinating to think that giants could have existed all that time ago, nobody can definitively say they didn't. But according to experts, this particular footprint is probably a fake. The Yade Girl. The corpse of the Yade Girl was discovered by Dutch laborers in a swampy bog back in 1897. She quickly became the world's most infamous bog mummy. She died 2,000 years ago, possibly at the hands of an executioner or some crazed cultist who used her as a human sacrifice. She died between the years 54 BC and 128 AD. She was discovered with a rope still tight around her neck, stab wounds around her collarbone, 1 foot and 1 hand cut off, and part of her pelvis stuck in the mud. As if all this wasn't horrible enough, the girl was only 16 when she wound up in the bog. Plus, researchers believe she had a major case of scoliosis and barely stood over 4 feet tall. Nobody knows for sure what happened on the day of her death all those thousands of years ago, but using the archaeological evidence for inspiration, researchers have a pretty good idea about why she was killed. They think that because of her scoliosis, the girl was singled out to be used in a ritual child sacrifice. She was taken away from the borders of her village, there was a small ceremony, and she was stabbed, strangled, and thrown in the muck. It's technically still unsolved, but this is the best theory that anyone has come up with. Thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe and come back soon for more amazing videos on ancient history. See you next time! Bye!